Greetings, boys and ghouls. It's your friend, the Crypt Keeper. And I, too, took a left at the valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith in unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. Atheist.
Coming at you from spooky Abbotsford, BC, this is Ghost in the Valley. My name is Kevin, and I tell you that if you divide the circumference of a jack-o'-lantern by its diameter, you get pumpkin pie. Joining me as usual is the haunting team of your nightmares, whom all of a sudden their cobwebs are now decorations. She was referring to petrified wood when she talked about a Halloween boner. Nancy.
I honestly thought you were going to say something about my parking my broom at the door. I was all prepared for the breaking.
No, the broom is mine.
The only candy he's interested in swings from a pole and it has daddy issues. Scott.
Yeah.
Get in trouble here. Someone rolled her eyes at her, so she kept them. Christina.
And they're very beautiful on my necklace with all the other pairs I have.
And she crossed Bambi with a ghost. Now she has bamboo. Kirsten. Oh, guys, welcome to our annual Ghost in the Valley.
Oh man, we have to work our way up or work our way down from the intro.
We hit rock bottom a couple of shows ago, remember?
I guess we're on our way up now. That's funny.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to have a great show. We're not going to do a show as usual. We're not going to be having our normal segments. We're just going to be telling ghost stories around the campfire. So speaking of campfire, we'll ask Scott to set up the campfire right away. So there you go. Campfire is
Here we go, man. I'm fast.
Oh, you're
Very
good.
fast.
You're good.
You must have been a Boy Scout.
No, I was an air cadet, but that's okay. We learned how to make fire, too.
Close enough. Halloween is my favorite time of the year. I don't know about you guys. I just love the holiday.
Christmas is the best, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Christmas is the best.
The comments of Christina are not necessarily those of the cast of Ghost of the Valley.
Well, you don't have to live with her.
Oh, that's
Night
true.
Before Christmas.
Anybody have any special feelings about Halloween? I didn't hear that. Leave the mic alone.
I've always
Are
enjoyed.
you doing with that mic? The night before Christmas. That's my favorite.
Oh, fair enough.
That is a ghost story.
You guys are all fired.
I enjoy Halloween just because of the kids when they put their costumes on and the trick or treating. I mean, they're having such a good time. That's what's and the campfire and the ghost stories around the campfire.
Speaking of history, we're not doing this day in history segment, but do you have a bit of a history to tell us about Halloween?
Why, yes, Kevin, I do.
What are the odds I would know that?
I mean, that's right.
There was any doubt.
I mean, since I was around at the beginning of Halloween, it's only fitting that I give a little tribute to it. Yes, this is the ancient origins of Halloween. It's been around, believe it or not, for about 2,000 years, and it goes back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. And it's spelled Samhain. So when I say Samhain, maybe people aren't going to connect it with the word that they've read. But that's where it was 2,000 years ago in an area that's now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France. And back in those days, they celebrated their new year on November the 1st. And the day marked the end of the summer and the harvest, and the beginning of the harvest and beginning of the dark, cold winter. And it was a time of year that was often associated with human death. death. So the Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. And on that night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth. So that's how long ago this myth, started. So in addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, the Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids, who were the Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future. So for people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, those prophecies were an important source of comfort and direction during the long, dark winter. So to commemorate the event, the Druids built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the deities. During the celebration, they wore costumes, typically consisting of animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, which they had extinguished earlier that evening from the sacred bonfire to help protect them from the coming winter. So there are elements of the beginnings that are still with us today. And then by 43 AD, the Roman Empire conquered the majority of Celtic territory, so they took it over. And in 609 AD, Pope Boniface dedicated the Pantheon in Rome to the honor of Christian martyrs, and the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established. Then by the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread to Celtic lands, and it generally blended with and supplanted the older Celtic rites. So in 1000 AD, the church would make November 2nd All Souls Day in order to honor the dead.
Freaking Christians, always ruining a good thing.
Yeah, that's
they
for
just
sure.
can't help themselves.
Yeah, so then we had the All Saints' Day, and the night before it was the traditional Samhain night of the Celtics, and that began to be called All Hallows' Eve, and eventually Halloween. So several centuries after that, of course, different ethnic groups did various things to celebrate or to suppress the holiday. When it came to America, it was suppressed because of the Protestants. But then in the second half of the 19th century, new immigrants came in, and Halloween got very, very popular. And today, the trick-or-treat tradition and Halloween is actually one of the favorite holidays. Anybody want to guess how much Americans, I think perhaps maybe including us as well in North America, anybody want to guess how much money is spent on Halloween? Definitely. I mean, including costumes and trick-or-treats and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely probably over like 10 billion.
Actually, you're close. 6 billion. Yeah, very, very
I knew
close.
it was in the billions.
I was going to say 4.735 billion.
Yeah.
And 50 cents.
And 50 cents.
And 50 cents. So Halloween has pretty well rocked along without any. I mean, there's been some history of destruction, some mischief making and things like that. But I think Halloween has changed significantly over the past 4 or 5 years, with some in American culture thinking that costumes are actually an appropriation of various cultures and ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. And so now there's prohibitions and feelings about, well, should I wear this costume? Does it degrade a certain group? Should I not? So I think it may be changing a little. And from my cultural point of view, I think it's not going to be as much fun, but it depends on your point of view, and that's
time will
brings us
tell.
up to today.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. All right. So who wants to go with our first ghost story? You know what? Let's go with Christina. You want to do... What are you trying to do today? What kind of a ghost story?
I am going to be reading The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe.
That's a classic.
It is, and it's one of my favorite stories. Well, technically a poem.
Put some moon music behind me.
Okay. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I sought to borrow from my books secrets of sorrow, sorrow from the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood, repeating, "'Tis some visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. 'Tis this, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madame, truly your forgiveness I implore." And so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarcely was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" Then this I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely this is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what threat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the stately days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but the mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern doctrine of this countenance it wore, "Through thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghost, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Platonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though it answered little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely in the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further then he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," I said, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmercifully disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, to the dyers of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven still beguiled all my sad soul into smiling. Straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird, and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking. Fancy unto fancy, thinking that this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosoms core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er. But whose velvet, violent lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by a seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tuft floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and repent from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind Nephrim, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, where'th temper sent, or where'th tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden if, within this distant Eden, it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Latonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quiet the bust above my door. Take thy break from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Kevin, I'm not hearing you.
I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my damn button on.
We could hear you through the room.
It's
but we weren't
the
hearing you from
influence of the raven.
I had nothing
the raven
important
had
to say.
it. The raven had it. Yeah, I mean,
That's
the
what
influence
it was.
there.
I had nothing important to say anyway. So,
Like usual.
speaking of horror, while our next storyteller comes up, Halloween is great for survival for horror movies. And here are the top 10 survival tips if you find yourself in a horror movie.
This is needed to know information for
Absolutely.
everyone.
That's right.
10. Don't run upstairs.
Never.
Never run upstairs.
Never.
It never works. You get out of the house. Number 9. Drop the camera. The guy with the
Yeah.
camera always gets killed.
Uh-oh.
There's no doubt about that.
Even if it's a phone?
Also,
Especially if it's a
there
phone.
are better things you can be holding.
Yes.
That's
Like
right.
a knife.
Yeah, a gun.
Better yet,
Yeah.
throw the camera.
Use the camera on the assailant.
Good thinking, Chris. Good
This might sound stupid, but number 8 is call the police.
Yeah, most people don't think
They
about
don't
that.
do that.
That closes things down so fast.
I know.
Unless you're in the middle of nowhere without cell service.
Exactly. I can put that one on. Number 7. Always check the car before getting in it. There's always a killer in the back seat.
Yeah.
That's
There
right.
always is. A slasher in the back seat. Number 6. Sounds pretty simple. Avoid creepy places. Curiosity kills in movies, in horror movies.
You mean we can't go visit the old asylum?
No.
That's been haunted for years.
The old abandoned amusement park, the haunted forest. No, you stay out of these places. Number 5. You avoid contacting the spirit world. It never ends well.
Excuse me, Ouija boards are the funnest.
Yes, they are.
So they're never on the side of the intended victim.
And you know what? It's costing you $9.99 to buy a Ouija board from Mattel. So you're out $10 on top of that.
Okay.
Number 4, keep your pants on. Sex scenes equal death.
That just takes all the fun out of dying.
Yeah, but you know what? In horror movies, only the virgins are safe.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
It could start with the
Wonder what
virgin.
you're referring to.
Number 3, you got to listen to any and all warnings. You got to be gullible to the max, no matter how outrageous the story.
Don't read the book that says "do not read."
Number 2, finish the job. He or she is never actually dead.
It's called the double tap.
That's right. And number 1, never ever split from the group and get really good at running.
Yeah, cardio. It's a useful skill.
Remember,
Finish that movie.
the slowest of you is the first to get it.
I feel so much better. I think maybe we should make little cards and print them out.
Also,
Survival tips in your wallet.
another rule: don't read things in languages you do not understand. Just don't do it.
Well,
You mean like the book of
Necronomicon.
That's it.
or the menu at Burger King.
The menu at Burger King works the same way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could summon the call the devil from Burger King. All right, who is our next storyteller?
Oh, let me go.
Oh, Scott.
Yes.
Do you want some more sound effects? Or are you good with what we
No,
got?
I think I'm good with the sound effects.
Okay.
The story I've chosen today, well, I guess we can say tonight, The Ghosts of Flight 401. In the 1970s, tales of ghostly apparitions flew around the USA and the rest of the airline world. Passengers, cabin crew, pilots, flight engineers, even top airline executives all claim to have seen something aboard certain aircraft. Before we begin the spooky tale, we must go back to the 29th of December in 1972. On board an Eastern Airlines Lockheed L-1011, registration N310EA, as it descended towards Miami on its flight from JFK Airport in New York. The mood on board Flight 401 was upbeat. 163 passengers and 13 crew were looking forward to enjoying the new year in the Florida sunshine. The 4-month-old L-1011, known as a TriStar, was the pride of Eastern's fleet. As the crew prepared for landing, the first in a chain of events occurred which would eventually lead to the loss of 101 lives. First Officer Albert Stockstill was instructed to lower the landing gear. Alarmingly, the crew noticed that not all the wheel indicator lights had turned green. Captain Bob Loft believed that it was a faulty light bulb. Stockstill struggled to remove the bulb, while flight engineer Don Repo went down to the avionics bay, or the hellhole as it was referred to, situated below the flight deck to visually check if the gear was down. As the pilots attempted to resolve the issue, they failed to notice that the autopilot had disengaged and they were now slowly descending towards the Everglades. The TriStar was traveling at 227 miles per hour when it slammed into the alligator-infested swamp just outside of Miami. Many passengers were killed instantly, and those that did survive faced an agonizing wait for rescuers to reach the craft site. First Officer Stockstill died on impact, while Repo and Loft survived the initial crash. As the rescue was slow coming, Loft died at the scene, while Repo died later in hospital. Tragically, it was later revealed that the nose wheel had indeed been locked in place, and it was the bulb that was faulty. Although the majority of the aircraft was destroyed, certain parts, such as the galley, were salvageable. Eastern Airlines and Lockheed agreed that these parts could be reused and fitted into other TriStars on the production line. One such aircraft was registration number N318EA, and as the weeks and months passed, strange things began to occur. In 1973, at JFK Airport, an Eastern Airlines TriStar was boarding for its flight to Miami. Traveling that morning was one of the airline's vice presidents. As a VIP passenger, he was allowed onto the aircraft first and made his way into the first-class cabin. As he moved towards his seat, he noticed a company captain in full uniform and went over to have a chat. During the ensuing conversation, he realized he was speaking to Bob Loft. The apparition quickly disappeared, and the vice president rushed off to find a crew member, terrified that this could be a bad omen. A search of the aircraft was carried out before any other passengers boarded, finding no sign of the mystery captain. A few months later, again at JFK, a crew boarding the same aircraft were surprised to see Loft already on board. They apparently chatted with the ghost, not realizing who he was, before he vanished right before their eyes. The flight was later cancelled as the crew were too shaken to operate. On L-1011s, flight engineers would usually arrive before the other crew to carry out their pre-flight checks. On one particular day, a flight engineer was stunned to see an Eastern second officer already sitting in his seat. He immediately recognized him as Don Repo. The apparition said to him, "You don't need to worry about the pre-flight, I've already done it," then disappeared right before his eyes. A few weeks later, another captain was checking the instruments before a flight from Miami to Atlanta. Staring him right in the face was the unmistakable outline of Repo's face. The captain claimed he distinctly heard the words, "There will never be another crash on an L-1011. We will not let it happen." During a flight from Atlanta to Miami on board N318EA, another aircraft in the fleet, the flight deck crew were enjoying their meal as they cruised at 39,000 feet. Suddenly, there was a loud knocking coming from the hellhole. Stories of the apparitions had been circulating around the company, so the crew were reluctant to look. The knocking continued, and the flight engineer opened the hatch. He was horrified to see the face of Don Repo staring back at him. Terrifyingly, this was where the engineer was when Flight 401 crashed. It wasn't just flight crews who saw the ghostly apparitions. On one occasion, several caterers loading that aircraft, N318EA, for its next flight were seen rushing off the jet and refusing to get back on. When asked why, they all stated that they had seen a flight engineer standing in the forward galley before vanishing right before their eyes. Passengers also reported strange occurrences. A woman who had sat next to an Eastern pilot said he looked ill. She called a stewardess only for the pilot to disappear. Another lady summoned a crew member as she was concerned about the unresponsive pilot sitting next to her. The man once again disappeared, leaving the passenger hysterical. After these incidents, both women were shown pictures of the deceased 401 flight crew, both identifying Don Repo as the crew member they had seen. So far, the majority of the reports of spooky happenings have been swiftly swept under the rug by Eastern. What airline would want passengers thinking that their aircraft are haunted by dead flight crew who had perished on board the pride of the fleet? Although the airline steadfastly refused to believe the spooky stories, the sightings were all reported in the Independent Flight Safety Foundation. Reported to the Independent Flight Safety Foundation, who later commented, "The reports were given by experienced and trustworthy pilots and crew. We consider them significant." Eastern went on to warn employees that they could face dismissal if they were caught spreading the ghost stories. One incident later on changed everything. Flight 903 had just taken off from JFK en route to Mexico City. A stewardess was in the galley preparing the meals for the passengers. As she reached for the handle of the oven door, she was horrified to see the face of Don Repo staring back at her. Not one to panic easily, she quickly made her way to the front to get another stewardess and the aircraft engineer to come and take a look. Arriving at the galley, the three of them saw Repo's face still staring out from the oven, although now it looked like he was trying to say something. All of them clearly heard him utter the words, "Watch out for fire in this plane." This was the oven that had been salvaged from Flight 401 and fitted on board N318. There were no further incidents on the flight to Mexico City. On the return leg to JFK, problems began with the aircraft's starboard engine. After an inspection, the aircraft was cleared before takeoff. But as the plane climbed, the engine failed. It was quickly shut down, before it caught fire and they returned to the airport. No one was hurt during the incident, but the crew were understandably shaken after what they had seen on the oven door. As the sightings became more and more frequent, rumors circulated that the pilots and crew were refusing to fly on the L-1011s that had been fitted with the parts from the doomed jet. All of the salvaged parts from 401 were later removed from the aircraft they had been installed on. The ghosts of Bob Loft and Don Repo were never seen again, but their haunting words to protect Eastern's L-1011 fleet came true. In the years following the crash, up until the airline's closure, there were no other fatalities on board the TriStar fleet. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, it is nice to think that those dedicated pilots may have kept the rest of the TriStar fleet safe. So the next time you're sitting aboard a plane and you feel a chill, take a look around. If you see someone sitting in a pilot's uniform, be sure to take a closer look. It could well be the ghost of Captain Bob Loft or Second Officer Don Repo keeping watch and making sure your flight arrives safely.
Ooh.
Nice.
A good
Pretty great story.
Yeah.
A good Samaritan ghost. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
too.
I like that.
Good story.
While we wait for a third story to pop up, here are some weird Halloween facts. Of course, dressing up, like Nancy said, was originally to scare off evil spirits. The spirits wouldn't recognize humans. That's why they used to dress up with the animal skins. Did you know that jack-o'-lanterns were originally made of turnip?
They'd be tiny jack-o'-lanterns, wouldn't it? Because it was an Irish thing. So when it happened, it came to North America, pumpkins were much more plentiful and easier to use.
I'm happy they made the switch.
In 2012,
Turnip pie, doesn't it? Turnip pie is not
Ew. Now that's a horror.
doesn't sound
that's a
as
horror
sweet.
story right
Doesn't
there.
sound
Turnip
good.
pie. In 2012, a postman saw a body, thought it was on the stairs of a house, thought it was a decoration. Turns out it was the resident who had died on the steps.
Oh my gosh.
Good decoration.
Yes.
Realistic.
Realistic.
If you bite into a Halloween cake, which is an American tradition, and you hit a thimble, you'll be unlucky in love.
Why would there be a thimble in a cake?
Americans don't cook very well.
What is a
right?
Halloween cake?
Oh, it's an American tradition, apparently. I guess it's like Christmas cookies, Halloween cake.
I don't know. I know they have funny things like that in Louisiana, but that's kind of a new one to me, too.
Mike Myers' mask in the Halloween movie was actually a mask of William Shatner.
Seriously.
Yes, it cost $2 at the time, and they painted it white.
Oh my gosh.
Halloween in Germany, they hide the knives so that returning spirits don't injure themselves.
What?
They
Yeah.
hide the what?
Knives.
Oh.
They hide knives. In Italy, there is an oval cookie called a fave del morti, which is called beans of the dead.
Okay.
Odds are that if your treats are poisoned, it's actually your relative. That actually only happened twice, in 1970 and in 1974. The old razor blade or the old poison in the candy only actually happened twice, and it was done by a relative.
Oh my gosh.
Can you
Never actually
imagine?
happened. All right. Moving on to our next little story.
I guess that's me. Okay, this is the perfect, absolute, perfect, ideal ghost story for scouts and rangers. What do they call the scouts in Canada? They're not Boy Scouts. They're they're
Scouts.
not Boy Guides, are
Yeah,
they?
they're
But
Scouts.
this is absolutely has every element that you love in a ghost story. So here we go. This is called The Wishing Well. And The Wishing Well is a scary ghost story about a group of Boy Scouts who go camping near a haunted field. And it's based on an old horror story by M.R. James. And originally it was called The Wailing Well. Here we go. Many years ago, there was an exclusive boarding school in England that had a scout troop. The leader was a teacher, and one weekend a month he would take the scouts on a camping trip. There was one young boy in the scout trip that was very disobedient and disruptive. His name was Stanley Jenkins, and he was always getting into mischief. No matter how many times the teacher told him, he would never listen. One weekend, the scouts went camping in the English countryside. They got permission to set up on a farmer's land. The spot was on a ridge overlooking a deep valley. The teacher warned the boys not to go off wandering on their own and told them that under no circumstances were they allowed to go down into that valley. While the teacher and the other boys were pitching the tents, Stanley Jenkins and his friends were sitting around in the grass. They were too lazy to help set up the camp. Instead, they went looking for some kind of mischief they could get into. As Stanley Jenkins gazed down into the valley, he noticed a field that was surrounded by a barbed wire fence. In one corner of the field, there was an old stone well. It looked like the field was never used and was overgrown with weeds and brambles. Just then, they saw the farmer who owned the land coming along with his dog. As he passed by, Stanley Jenkins waved at him, and the farmer stopped to talk. "What's in the field down there?" asked Stanley Jenkins. "The one with the well inside it." "That's the wishing well," the farmer replied. "But you're not allowed to go down there. I hope your teacher told you that." "Wishing well?" said Stanley Jenkins. "You mean if you throw some money into the well, you can make a wish?" The farmer let out a grim laugh. "I wouldn't know," he said. "That's what they call it. But nobody around here goes near the wishing well, and in all the years I've lived here, I've never set foot in that field." "What's the matter with it?" asked Stanley Jenkins. "All I know is the cows and the sheep keep away from it. Even my old dog wouldn't go through that field, and neither should you boys if you got a brain in your heads. They say it's haunted." "Haunted?" Stanley Jenkins scoffed. "Haunted by whom?" "3 women and a man," said the farmer. "Who are they?" asked Stanley Jenkins. "It all happened before my time," said the farmer. "But I was told they died in the well, or were found dead in it. I saw them once. It was twilight, and I was standing on this very ridge. My old dog saw them too. They came out of the bushes and went crawling around, 4 of them. Black, sand-white bones. It seemed as if I could hear their bones clacking as they moved. I couldn't make out any faces. All I could see was their teeth." The boys let out a collective gasp. Stanley Jenkins chuckled. "What happened then?" he asked. "I don't know," said the farmer. "My old dog took off running, and I took off running after him. So take my advice, boys. Stay clear of that wishing well if you know what's good for you." With that, the farmer tipped his hat and walked off. The boys stared after him. "What a load of bull," said Stanley Jenkins. "I don't believe a word of it." The next evening, the teacher gathered the scouts and did a head count. He noticed one of the boys was missing. After a roll call, he discovered that the missing boy was Stanley Jenkins. None of the other scouts seemed to have any idea where he was. Then one boy spoke up. "Maybe he went down to the wishing well, sir," he said. The teacher's face went pale. "The wishing well?" he gasped. "But you were all given strict instructions not to go down there." The scouts followed their teacher as he walked up to the top of the ridge and looked down into the valley below. The light was fading and it was getting cold, but there wasn't a breath of wind in the air. "Can anyone see him?" the teacher asked. "There he is," said one of the boys, "getting over the barbed wire fence. Do you see him?" "Yes, it's him," said another boy. "I recognize his sweater. Now he's making his way toward the wishing well." "That little idiot," the teacher growled. At that moment, one of the boys let out a high-pitched scream and covered his eyes. "What's that black thing on the path?" cried another boy, "crawling on all fours. It's a woman. Oh, God, don't let me look at her." "Stop it," said the teacher loudly. "Get a hold of yourselves. I'm going down there. Hancock and Fartleby, you run to the farmer's house and call for help. The rest of you boys stay here, and don't move." The teacher ran off, leaving the boys alone on the ridge, staring down at the field below. To their horror, they saw another black figure emerge from the bushes. Then another, and another. They saw Stanley Jenkins making his way toward the wishing well. He didn't seem to notice the black figures approaching him, shuffling forward with their arms outstretched. The boys started yelling as loud as they could, trying to warn him. As he reached the wishing well, Stanley Jenkins seemed to hear their cries. He suddenly stopped and turned around. Then he let out a scream more piercing and dreadful than any of the boys on the ridge heard, but it was too late. The black figures closed in on him until he was surrounded on all sides. Then they pounced. The boys spotted their teacher running toward the field. He scrambled through the barbed wire fence, but then he stopped and wouldn't go any further. The farmer arrived with a number of policemen. The boys pointed down at the field below and screamed, "They got him! They got him!" Over and over again. The policemen ran down into the valley. The headmaster arrived, and all the boys were transported back to the school. Some of them were so traumatized that they later left the school. The teacher stayed there with the police all night. The next morning at dawn, they found what was left of Stanley Jenkins at the bottom of the wishing well. He had been torn to pieces. His parents came to collect the remains. The farmer put up another barbed wire fence encircling the field and erected large signs with "Danger" and "Keep Out" written in large red letters. Locals in the area say that the field is now haunted by 5 ghostly black figures. 3 men, a man, and a young boy.
That was beautiful. What a story. What a story.
It is. It's got all the elements of a great scout scary story, doesn't it?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a
Now,
long
didn't
story.
we go over paying
Just-
attention to those omens?
Should have paid attention, yeah.
Just the thing you want to tell to a bunch of Boy Scouts in the dark, dark woods.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's the kind of story those scouts will tell to their sons when they get old enough. You can't help but hand it down.
All right, continuing on our spooky ghost stories. Kirsten, you're up.
Well, I've got a nice little story here. It's not really scary, but it's a cute story. I thought it was a very adorable ghost, very friendly ghost, and it takes place in Vancouver.
You sure it's not the tax returns of Donald Trump?
Oh, I'm pretty sure.
See, Nancy just about choked on that one.
The story is called A Phantom Roommate. Small, nondescript apartment buildings dot this country's urban landscapes. Although many of these multiple family residences were constructed in the 1950s, they continue to provide adequate accommodation today for those living on a limited budget. One particular apartment block on West 12th Avenue in Vancouver offered one important added extra. Choosing to live at this address meant that you might have an occasional ethereal visitor. No one had ever been able to figure out who the ghost may have been while he was alive, but at least 3 residents know that, as a ghost at least, he was a companionable sort of fellow. After a period of adjustment, 2 men who shared a suite in the haunted building came to quite enjoy the spirit's presence in their lives. Initially, they had no idea what was causing an apparently sourceless shadow to occasionally appear, and they were frightened by it, as people generally would be. Once they realized that the apparition would do them no harm, the pair became quite accepting and even welcoming of their guest. Once that acceptance had occurred, the phantom sometimes also manifested as that strange sensation of not being alone, when reason says that no one else is in the room. The pair of renters might not always have been able to see the phantom's form, but they could hear him as he settled into one or another of the chairs in the living room. They soon got into the habit of offering pleasantries to their invisible visitor in order to acknowledge his arrival. Some months later, and for reasons completely unrelated to the ghost, the men moved on. They left the haunted apartment behind, but never forgot the entity, nor the time that they had spent with him. Many years after leaving that apartment, one of the men happened to meet a woman who had also lived in that building. She too had stories to tell, stories that were eerily similar to his. It seemed that the phantom traveled from one suite to another, socializing to the best of his ghostly ability as he went.
Okay, that's
Such
cool.
a Canadian ghost.
It's a Canadian ghost.
Story.
Sorry.
I love it.
as it accidentally passed through you and you get that chill. I'm so sorry.
Very social. Very
Here's
social
a flannel.
Let the ghostly apologies begin.
Here are some more Halloween facts. The word witch actually comes from the Old English. I think it's pronounced wishy, which is spelled W-I-C-C-E, which actually means wise woman. Speaking of fears, Samhainophobia, it's the fear of Halloween. You can have a phasmophobia, which is the fear of ghosts, or nyctophobia, which is the fear of darkness. When it comes to kids, 50% of all kids prefer chocolate for the candy.
Those children are weird.
24% prefer non-chocolate candy, and 10% prefer gum.
Okay,
I
those
like
kids are just messed
rockets.
up.
I like rockets.
Yes.
And to all those American listeners who
Smarties.
don't know what rockets are.
Smarties.
They don't know Smarties either. They have M&Ms on there. They don't know.
No, they have Smarties. Those are what we call rockets. Our Smarties are chocolate covered like M&Ms.
Yes, exactly. In medieval times, an owl was a sign of witches, so they would have a tendency to kill owls. If you heard an owl, it meant certain death for you.
But owls
That's
are so
sad.
pretty.
That's probably why they always run from Hogwarts.
It probably
There's
did.
too many owls.
It probably also did help during the bubonic plague, the Black Plague, right? Because if something would kill a rat, an owl would be the cats and the rat and the owls, right?
That's so sad.
The largest pumpkin was grown by a guy named Norm Craven in 1933. It weighed 836 pounds.
That is a big pumpkin.
That is a big pumpkin.
That's
A
not
lot of
true
pie.
anymore.
Oh, there's a new record?
Oh, they're up in the 2,000 range.
Oh, well, okay. Never mind then.
Ha
Halloween has been called All Hallows Eve, like Nancy said, Witch's Night, Lamb's Wool, Snap Apple Night, Samhain, or how did you pronounce it?
Sow-in.
Sow-in, thank you. And Summer's End. There's an old superstition that said if you were looking in the mirror at midnight on Halloween, it would reveal your boyfriend's face.
That's sad.
Yes.
What if you don't want a boyfriend?
Don't look in the mirror. It's that simple.
No, but what if you want a girlfriend?
Look in a different mirror.
Look in the mirror in your closet.
Yeah, okay, that works too. Bonfires were common, but the funny thing is the Druids used to throw cattle bones in the fires to ensure the return of the sun. So bonfire became bonfire.
Oh, I always thought the bon might have something to do with the French good. Like
It could have been, yeah. So they
Just
say
shows to go you. When you're wrong, you're wrong.
the earliest origins of Halloween would date back at 4000 BC. It's a very old tradition now. And Boston has the jack-o'-lantern record. They all of them lit at once. They had 30,128 jack-o'-lantern lit
That's a lot.
What a fire hazard.
in Boston.
But by the way, there, Kevin,
Yep.
Benny Mayer,
Yep.
a Swiss accountant by day, grew a pumpkin that weighs in at 2,323.7 pounds.
All right. Well, sorry, Norm. You've just been dethroned.
That story was from 2015.
That's a big, big pumpkin. All right. Any one of you guys actually seen a ghost, or you think you ever came in contact with a ghost or something like that?
No.
No? We're too skeptical for that, right?
There's an explanation for it.
I once heard a cat meow that nobody else in my family heard when I was a kid.
I once heard a crow that I swore was real, but nobody else around me heard it. And I was like, what's going on? Why can I hear a crow and nobody else can?
Oh, goodness. All right.
Tinnitus.
Okay, so before we move on to our guest, let me tell you a few other Halloween trivia. Did you guys know that in the U.S. in 2014, for example, 1.31 billion pounds of pumpkins were produced?
That's a lot of pumpkin pie.
In 2013, 41 million trick-or-treaters, we're talking about 5 to 14-year-olds, spent $1 billion on costumes. By 2014, it was $3 billion on costumes.
Wow.
There is 35 million pounds of candy corn that is produced every year.
Why? Candy corn's so gross.
It's a classic. Consumers apparently spent $5.8 billion in 2010 and $7 billion by 2015 on Halloween. Harry Houdini, the legendary magician, died on Halloween in 1926 from a ruptured appendix from taking a punch to the gut. The National Retail Foundation says that 64% of Americans have actually celebrated the holiday in 2015 and spent on average $74 per adult on candy, costume, and decor.
Back in my day, we used to make
candy
our
alone.
costumes.
Yep. Halloween has surpassed Valentine's Day as far as candy is concerned. 90 million pounds of chocolate is actually at $1.9 and $1.9 billion spent on candy, which is twice Valentine's.
Well, the thing with Halloween candy is there's such a variety.
And children.
Valentine's kind of just
Yeah, there is
boring.
such a variety of children.
Like, if you don't like chocolate, you can get, like, Skittles.
Now, apparently Halloween cars are a thing. Now, according to Hallmark, $20 million cars each year are made for Halloween.
Weird.
Christmas, though, is 1.5 billion. Christmas cars are way over. In Belleville, Illinois, kids over 12 years old caught trick-or-treating can face a $100 to $1,000 fine.
What?
You're not allowed to trick-or-treat.
That is
After
just
what age?
mean.
12.
After 12.
I was
I give
trick-or-treating at,
candy
like,
out
15.
to adults.
No, I have a feeling that's probably because all the vandalism on Halloween is
okay.
generally kids who are, between, 13 and 19 years
Yeah,
old.
but the thing is, the kids doing the trick-or-treating aren't vandalizing. They're getting candy. It's when they aren't trick-or-treating that they're like, oh,
I've seen adults come around in costume with the kids, and I have to give candy to the adults. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll be right back with our guest, Andrea Garatschun, and we'll be talking about the devil. Ooh. So stay with us.
Hi, I'm the Supreme Irreverend Dr. Randy Tyson from the Legion of Reason Diversion. Join me and my co-hosts, Christine Shelska, Twyla, and Nate Phelps, as we explore issues at the intersection of atheism, humanism, and skepticism. Topics range from alternative medicine to the interference of religion in public policy. We often have special guests to help us understand the topic du jour. Previous guests include biologist Jerry Coyne, ex-Muslim author Ali Rizvi, philosopher Peter Boghossian, and the late physicist Victor Stanger. You can watch us on the Legion of Reason YouTube channel or subscribe to the audio version through your favorite podcatchers such as iTunes or Stitcher. And don't forget to like the Legion of Reason Facebook page.
But Tara, take the sound before you make it. And you start to freeze. And so it looks you right between the eyes. You're paralyzed. 'Cause this is
Okay, so our guest is Andrea Garatschun. She's a former Christian fundamentalist. She's now an atheist. She spent the past decades as a Bible researcher with a focus on biblical Hebrew and understanding the gods of the Old Testament. She's a snappy dresser and a snazzy dancer. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on Left of the Valley.
It's so good to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
You've only been there for 2 minutes. You don't know yet.
You don't know what you've gotten yourself into yet.
Thank you so much for calling us all the way from Australia. Andrea, you're making quite a name for yourself in the United States. You might not be as well known up here north of the 49 parallel. Would you be so kind to give our audience a quick Reader's Digest version of who you are?
Sure. I was born into a very Christian fundamentalist home. My dad is a minister. By the time I was 12, I was very deep into fundamentalist Baptist, sort of the Southern Baptist type, thanks to some American missionaries that came to Australia. I left that movement and went into Pentecostalism, but from a very young age, I was singing in church. And so throughout my adult life till the age of 35, I was a worship leader, singer-songwriter, and sort of heading the ministry in churches, doing all the singing and the worship sets. So that sort of occupied my life, but I constantly had questions just running and doubts running in the back of my mind that, like good Christian girls, I suppose people, you sort of push down and say, oh, that's the devil,
Yep.
Trying to tempt me or whatever. But it just got way too much. And I started to take more time. I mean, I was an avid reader of the Bible anyway. But by the time I left my Christian faith, I had started to look into the original text, and I didn't like what I found. And so I left my faith by praying on my knees. And then as soon as that was immediately over, I asked the question, well, who are the gods of the Bible? In particular, the Lord God, which I will refer to as Yahweh Elohim. And that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years, looking into researching, studying, trying to get my degree and moving on towards other types of scholarship to answer these questions and to shed some light, I suppose, into what the Bible really says about these gods.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, today we're going to be talking, because this is our Halloween episode, we can't not talk about the devil. I mean, the devil here, the devil there. Heck, I've been called a devil a few times myself. So maybe you can give us, the classic origin story of the devil.
Yeah, sure. Well, I really look at it from the lens of the Hebrew Bible now, but from a perspective of being a Christian that I once was, we have a set of theology, I suppose, or doctrine about Satan. And so we're sort of told certain things, mainly that the devil was the serpent in the garden. He's the fallen angel, the brilliant Lucifer, if you like. And these are all Old Testament sort of references as well. And all these sort of pieces of scripture are all sort of bundled in together, and then voila, we're presented with the New Testament Satan that comes to steal, kill, and destroy people, and in particular hunt down the Christian to sort of wear them out and lead them astray. Well, it's not like that at all. And I suppose the starting off stories or passages in the Bible from the Old Testament are nothing like what we're presented from the pulpit. And it's very concerning, I suppose, because people, even after they've left their faith, still carry around fear and sort of have doubts and troubles to do with the area of Satan and of the devil and of hell and all of the consequences that get wrapped in with the Satan idea. So that's sort of, yeah.
Yeah, well, people get really, really attached to the character, right? I mean, the character makes more appearances in modern culture than the light side of the Force, if you wish, or God ever did, right? I mean, you got the version of the devil in many movies. You don't see a version of God in movies, right? You always see the bad guy. You never see the good guy. You only see a light and a music or some kind, right? Why are we so fascinated with the bad guy here, or the supposed bad guy?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I think that we are sold our Western culture and a Eurocentristic sort of idea has come through to us that there is an arch enemy, an evil. That we want to pin all of the ills of the world on, I suppose, as a sort of scapegoat, and we can put blame on that agency. And also, I think what the religion has done very well, Christianity in particular, of course, is use this character as the stick. It's the weapon. They've weaponized, I suppose, this devil, this Satan character, as the fear factor that motivates people into faith.
If there's one thing Christians are good, it's making you miserable.
Well, yeah. Indeed.
So, but the current image that we have of the devil, Lucifer, and all that is not the same image that's been portrayed of him all throughout his illustrious career.
Yeah, I mean, there's been an evolving sort of, I suppose, motif, and my area of sort of study, if you like, because I'm into the Hebrew Bible, is well, what does it say? What do Christians want to say? What does Christian theology or doctrine want to say that the devil attributing to Satan from the Old Testament perspective? And then later on, of course, that all morphs and changes as we move into Judaism and then through into Christianity. And, we've got this other product at the end that's got nothing to do with what the original, the sacred text of Christianity from the earliest writings says. And there's a contradiction, and that's a problem. And not many people know this.
So for example, if we separate Christianity from Judaism and its roots, is there a different version of the devil for in Jewish folklore?
Well, actually, I don't know too much about Jewish folklore. I do know, and we can certainly go through all of the aspects of what Christianity picks up in the Hebrew Bible, and there is a distinction, I might say, between, the Yahwist cult of the, pre-First Temple sort of Israelite culture, and then, what happened post-exile. So there's sort of, there's a lot of nuances there that are going on. So I can't speak a lot about Jewish sort of ideas about Satan, but I can certainly say what the Bible says. So I know it sounds weird, but there is a distinction between the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead and give us those distinctions as how you see them.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, I sort of call this whole area the Satanic Trinity, which sort of plays on the Holy sort of Trinity.
Yeah.
Because
I love it.
Yeah, because we end up with three main areas that Christianity wants to hook onto in the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible. The first one, the most typical one, I even heard someone the other day on some other podcast talk about this. They say, the devil, the Satan in the Garden of Eden. And they want to say, and it seems as though a lot of Christians think this, that the serpent that's talked about in chapter 2 and 3 is about Satan. So that's the first thing. So we've got what we actually have is in Hebrew the word for serpent is nachash, and never is it called Satan in the Bible. And I'll get to what Satan is actually sort of means in Hebrew in a minute. But so you've got this character in the Genesis story in the Garden of Eden that's talking and walking, and I even hear sort of secular people like you and like us say, there was a walking, talking snake. That's not how that's just fantasy. And although I don't subscribe at all to the mythologies of the Old Testament, I actually don't think that the Nachash is an animal. I think it is actually a type. I think the biblical writers elsewhere in the text actually talk about these Nachash as being weaponized agents of Yahweh that go around and slaughter. And later on in the books in sort of Isaiah and further on, they actually go through cities and kill people. So it's not a snake. It's actually a sort of, we're made to, the portrait is later on in other references, if you get what I'm saying, is that it's like a human type person that's doing this work. So this is why they're talking and why they're saying things and why they're saying true things about the Elohim, about Yahweh, and saying that Yahweh's tricking you. You're not going to die, Adam and Eve, when you eat of this, whatever this thing is called, fruit. So that's number one. This is not Satan. So shall I talk about what actually Satan is?
Well, by all means.
So in Hebrew, the word Satan is Satan, and it literally means adversary. It's a job title, not a person. People take on the role of Satan when they're involved in certain activities in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, so this is the first misunderstanding of the word Satan. So, for example, the word Satan or the adversary, Hasatan, is mentioned in Job. Do you know the text in Job there?
Yes.
So we get this verse where it says, well, the sons of God came into the presence of Yahweh, in the presence of the Lord, and it says, and in English, and Satan was amongst them. So it says in Hebrew, and Hasatan was amongst them. So in other words, this Hasatan, who we don't know his name, we just know that he was an adversary to Yahweh because of what he says in the following verses, turns out he's the son of a god.
Oh.
Now, that's what the verse literally says. He's a son of the Elohim. Now, that flies in the face of everything sacred to Christianity, because the implications are just, there's just all kinds of things going on here. So first of all, how come there are sons of God? Well, we know that from earlier verses in Genesis, but that contradicts what John 3:16 says. Mm-hmm. When, so Jesus is supposed to be the only son of God. Well, not according to Job. There's a lot of them, and Satan's one of them. Well, that's, that just throws everything out. So we know then that he was just an adversary, and then the next thing you know, they're cutting a deal about how they can play games with Job.
Yes.
And see how much he sort of, will show his faithfulness to Yahweh, despite being nearly wiped out by this adversary character, which God lets him do. So it's not as if,
And of course, Job is one of the oldest book in the Bible, as we know it at this point, right?
I suppose some scholarship would say that. I'm not sure exactly. I actually only the other day I heard something different, so it could be. But but in any case, this is what the writer, the redactor or the writers of Job have said about this Satan or this person, this son of God that's performing the role. So that's the second sort of part of the Trinity. So we've got the snake, the Nachash, then we've got the Hasatan from Job. The third part of this Trinity, as I see it, is the Lucifer character or personification. So, we're all sort of, in the Christian mindset, we all think, Lucifer is Satan. I mean, would that be something that you'd say is fair enough?
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. So that verse is found in Isaiah chapter 14. But when we have a good close look at it, and again, we find that the doctrine that Christianity sometimes puts together, like the doctrine of Satan, is very cherry picked. So you get verse 12 that says, Lucifer, Satan's not mentioned at all, which is in Hebrew, Halel. So it's, this Lucifer word is not even Hebrew. It comes from the Vulgate or Latin or something. So we've got this character that in verse 4, further up in that chapter, we're told is the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar II. So, how is it possible that Satan is Nebuchadnezzar II? So that's just another part of the Trinity, the Satanic Trinity, debunked in a few seconds just by reading the actual chapter where this is mentioned. The other linking sort of part of doctrine, if you like, that Christianity hooks onto in the Lucifer category, if you like, is in Ezekiel in chapter 28, where there's a reference to the anointed cherub that covereth. I don't know if you know that verse. And everyone's like, that there'll be messages from the pulpit on the anointed cherub that covereth, and that's supposedly Satan and Lucifer and the snake and, all this sort of thing. But if we look up further, we find that that's the king of Tyre, King Hiram. Again, not the not what you'd expect when you go to satanic doctrine. So and there's a whole lot of bundling in with both of those, Lucifer and the anointed cherub. If you go through the descriptions, you've got some weird things going on for sure, but that just raises other questions that put challenge other types of other theological sort of positions of Christianity. So it's just a can of worms, really, when you start to go into, the actual verses that Christians want to say support their doctrine on Satan.
I totally understand now. A can of worms, they use the worm to get the fish, and that's why the fish is a symbol of Christianity. There we go. Mystery solved.
I love it. It all makes sense now.
By the way, the city of Tyre, for those of us that might not know, is that city that was prophesied to be destroyed, never to be rebuilt, and still exists today. Oh my God! Prophecy failed.
Just love prophecy like that. Yeah.
So going back to the El Satan there, I heard that was a Zoroastrian concept, the concept of the devil's advocate in a way, somebody that speaks for the bad side. Is that really the case?
I suppose, again, I'm not really an expert on Zoroastrianism, but, and that could be the case. To be quite honest, I haven't gone into that side of the equation. So because of my narrow research study into just the Hebrew Bible, I'm sure that by the time I've read this, that by the time the tribe of Judah is going into exile, that they're exposed to a whole heap of other ideas from the religion of the Babylonians, so Zoroastrianism. So there's ideas that are starting to filter in to Jewish thought post-exile, and then these things are carried through, and they're carried through alongside with Greek, classical Greek ideas. And then there's just this merger and evolving of this idea that you've got sort of Greek gods that were once, like, for example, Hades, early considered a god in the pantheon. And then next thing you know, if you keep on reading the literature, the classical literature, you find that Hades becomes a place, not a person, not a god. Mm-hmm. So you've got all these evolving ideas. The next thing you know, this Hades character is hell, and that bundled in, also merged in with ideas from Christianity, and the Sheol idea of the Hebrew Bible being the pit, which is rendered in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, as being hell sometimes. So there's some little tricks going on that all of a sudden we get this idea in the New Testament and moving forward to this day that weren't what they were. These ideas weren't like that hundreds, thousands of years ago.
Yeah, there's so many things wrong with it, the entire story. I mean, even from a layman's perspective, you look at Adam and Eve and the supposed first appearance of Satan, which, of course, you'll agree with me that it never says Satan at all. In the passage, it says the serpent. And it's only when you look at Revelation that line that says, "Oh, Satan, you old snake," and that's how Christians established that it was Satan in the garden to begin with. Simple questions like, why is there a tree of knowledge? I mean, does God need to eat a fruit once in a while? I mean, if he knows everything, what does he need that tree to begin with? You know, I mean, I don't understand these questions.
Oh, and don't forget there was a tree of life as well.
That's right.
So God's like a vegan.
Oh, look, I mean, first of all, you know, do we even want to entertain the idea that the whole thing has, you know, some element of truth in it? And if there was, is it really what the writers of, you know, when it comes to the trees? And I just spent a few months ago, I spent quite a few weeks looking at that from an analogy or metaphor perspective, because there are plenty of verses, we're sort of going off track here, but there are plenty of passages in the Hebrew Bible that give you the key to unlock that metaphor. Plenty of them. And I was shocked as I started to go down that hole, finding out that trees aren't trees, fruit isn't fruit, leaves aren't leaves. The wild animals and beasts of the field and the fowl of the air are not beasts of the field and fowl of the air. They're other things.
Well, if you start changing every word and every meaning of every word, you can make this story tell anything.
Well, that's it. But the actual biblical writers do that, though. They actually say in certain passages, there's a passage in the Psalms, there's some in the prophets later on that actually say, yeah, the trees are this, and the fruit is, you know, not the fruit, but the trees are this, and the beasts of the field are this, and they basically go, you know, for every sort of part of the analogy, they give it what the target is, you know, what it actually should be. And then, so it's all, and also remember, well, scholarship says, or most scholars would say, that the book of Genesis, especially the end part of it, but is sort of written in post-exilic or around the exile. So it's not the first book written. It's sort of redacted by the Deuteronomistic writer or redactor, and it's sort of written way long past when the things actually happened.
So if you were to take what you went through there and you replace, you know, the fowls don't necessarily mean fowls, and you replace all these words, does the story start with "in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago"? Is that how it starts? Because I would be really interested all of a sudden.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know about that, but the story is to do with the Elohim, and I must say now that I have a very different perspective, if you like, or understanding of what the gods are in the Hebrew Bible compared to Orthodoxy, and also what even most secular people would, you know, sort of say about who God is. So, you know, there's many gods in the Old Testament. They're called the Elohim. Yahweh is one of them. He thinks he's the best one, and we get the perspective of him through the through the Hebrew sacred text. So, you know, we get his side of history, if you like.
Mm-hmm. I kind of side with Thor myself.
We like Thor.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm not too keen on him, but
you're not.
Turns out.
To each their own.
I thought all the ladies like Thor.
No, I'm a fan of Artemis.
Artemis. Okay, fair enough.
Oh, very nice.
I love that theme with this meme of Jesus, where Jesus has got his hands outstretched. He says, "Come at me, bro," and then you see Thor with his hammer, and next thing you know, he's nailed onto a cross.
Be aware of the gods and their weapons.
Exactly. All right, so So Andrea, the devil throughout the ages. So has he? When you look at your studies in the Bible, did he evolve himself as a character as well?
Well, he doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah, of course not.
My message would be in the Hebrew Bible. I call him the classic Christian Satan. is not there. He's just not there. And I'll give you some other reasons other than just this trinity of the snake and Job's son of God, Satan, and the Lucifer character. We've also got times where Satan is actually God.
Oh.
So there's a contradiction between two verses, one in 2 Samuel 24, which says that Yahweh, the Lord God, moved King David to number Israel and Judah to actually count the people in a census. Mm-hmm. So that verse says that Yahweh did that, right? The Israelite deity. But in 1 Chronicles, chapter 21, the same story is repeated. But in that verse 1, it says, and Satan stood against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. It's the same story. One is God doing the provoking, and one is Satan, as it's rendered in your English Bible, doing the provoking. So which one is it? How is it that God can also be Satan? Because in the Christian, paradigm, that's impossible.
Is it possible that God is unionized and he went on strike, and then the scab came in the form of Satan?
It's got some psychological issues. In my hermeneutic, if you like, in the way I interpret the Bible, this is not even a contradiction. I'm doing Christianity a favour here because the word Satan is the word adversary in Hebrew. That's what it means. Satan means adversary. So in this sense, the Lord God became resistant to King David. He became King David's adversary in that moment, just in that moment, and caused him to do something. And God does do these crazy types of things. He made, Pharaoh harden his heart. When he, how crazy is that? When he wanted to let the people go, and yet he gets Pharaoh not to by hardening, whatever that means, hardening his heart. So we've got a place. So we've got that where God is named Satan. So clearly, either God is Satan, which just destroys Christianity in terms of its theology, or Satan doesn't mean Satan in the Christian mindset. Okay, and I would be here to say that's the latter, and that's why there's no Satan character, because every time the word Satan appears, we're talking about an adversary that's taking up a job role in that moment. There's another story, the story of the talking donkey.
Oh, yes, Balaam and his donkey.
Balaam, or as they want to call
I
him.
know quite a few talking donkeys.
Yeah.
He's looking at me when he says that, too. I hate that.
I only look at you with a gleam in my eye, Kevin.
So here comes this talking donkey with the prophet of Baal, the Baalim on there. Balaam, his name is in English, and there's an angel that actually stands in the way as the donkey's going, and the donkey gets really upset and gets angry, and he starts telling off the guy on his back. But the angel literally says, I am Satan. I basically, and the angel says, so let's get this right. I went out to, in English it says, I went out to withstand you. That's what it says in English, to say the King James Version. The word withstand is the word Satan, Satan. So in this verse, the angel literally saying, I am Satan to you. But of course, he's not Satan. There's no Satan character. He's playing the role of the adversary. So he's saying, I have come here to be an adversary to you. So again, and because even the translators know that, they haven't transliterated, right? Say the word Satan or the word Satan. They've not done that like they did it in Job. Oh, they want to transliterate all of a sudden Satan into Satan and make this character. Yeah. That's the trick that they play, but they haven't done it here because they know it. That's not what's going on, and they're being honest for once. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So these are examples of that go towards no Satan in the Old Testament, no Christian Satan. There are verses like that. King David is called a Satan. There's a place there where King David decides he wants to actually go and fight with the Philistines one time, and the Philistines called him Satan. But again, it's not rendered like that in English, in your English Bible, because that wouldn't be kosher to call David Satan, because it doesn't fit with the theology or the doctrine. So all of a sudden, he's not called that anymore. He's just called an adversary, which is exactly what it is every time.
Well, that really throws Christianity up on its head, doesn't it? All this information.
It like I said, it opens the can of worms in that it questions everything about it. It questions what is going on? And does this Yahweh character really have a sort of an arch adversary? Well, if not, it seems like no. Only through the Hebrew Bible are these individual adversary or Satan types popping up here and there. They're always different. Sometimes they're kings of other countries. Sometimes it's God himself. Sometimes it's another human or a King David, for example. It's littered with these Satans. So there's no one particular one that's always there lurking, as the Christian religion would have you believe.
Interesting.
You see? So by the time you get to the New Testament, what the hell is going on? With Satan, all of a sudden, throughout all of history that's happened, human history, now in the Roman Empire, Roman occupied Judea, all of a sudden now you've got a Satan running around with Jesus occasionally, tempting him in the desert. I don't think so.
I think a weekend with Satan would probably be more fun than a weekend with Jesus, I would think.
Definitely.
So Andrea, I guess the only way, if you really stumble, the only way you're really sure it's Satan is if you meet him in Georgia and he's got a golden fiddle, then you know for sure it's him. But otherwise, you can't be sure, right?
And it's burning, yeah. The microphone I can see here on your website, yeah. That's right.
Andrea, thank you so much for explaining to us the devil in his details. But the mic is all yours, dear. If you got something coming up or you want to plug yourself, go right ahead. Be shameless.
No, I've got nothing coming up. I'm just constantly in the books. That's all.
So your next field of study there, you keep studying the ancient gods. Is there a particular field you're studying right now?
Well, yeah. Look, I mean, while I'm not, at uni doing writing papers or whatever, on the breaks, I suppose I've got a long-standing project that I've been working on and spent a lot of time on actually this year in particular. But look, my interest is in, as you say, it's in the gods, but it's of the Hebrew Bible, and there's a lot of them, and they're named. Mm-hmm. But in particular, Yahweh, the Israelite deity, I'm actually very passionate about something that is rarely spoken of, has sort of attracted a lot of bad press, if you like, over the years because of sort of just wooey elements in our society, if you like. Mm-hmm. But there's a really strong theme that runs through the Hebrew Tanakh that I want to address sort of in an academic way, and that is, in Hebrew it's called the Rechev of Yahweh, or the chariot of God.
Ooh. The
chariot of Yahweh, and what it is, how it pops up, what it does, and this is, just from it's not, I'm not saying I believe it, I'm just saying this is what the Bible says, and it's just ignored and it's just pushed aside, and to me it's a game changer for anyone that would still believe in the tenets of Christianity and believe that the Lord God is their God and Saviour. To have a look at this idea of God having a chariot, it just changes everything as far as I'm concerned.
It certainly does. And if he was to have a modern chariot today, I picture him having a Volvo for some reason.
So, but
No, a Tesla.
No, he
Why
is
a
not
Swedish
that
car?
energy of he doesn't care about the planet that much.
It's not about the planet. It's about how fast it can accelerate. He wants a Tesla.
No.
Andrea, before I let you
Hummer.
go. What, a Hummer? Oh, yeah, sure, why not?
He's
Andrea,
compensating for something.
the comments of Christina are not necessarily known have left the Valley subsidiaries.
Send your complaints to floor 3, Nancy.
Andrea, my dear, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate all your wisdom and all that. Before I let you go, I gotta have you say, hi, I'm Andrea Garatschun, and I took a left at the Valley.
Hi, I'm Andrea Garatschun, and I took a left at the Valley.
And that was Andrea Garatschun. What a fantastic source of information for everything you need to know about the devil. All right, let's finish off the night with a creation from yours truly. I call this seaweed. Enjoy. It's a gorgeous night. The serenade of the wave embraces my ears. The sea emanates a mist, creating dampness upon my troubled brow. I cannot move. Well done, Ben. God, how I loathe my brother. It was common knowledge that my little brother Ben was afraid of seaweed. Naturally, we terrorized him with it. Peace in his bed, peace in his shoe, and my favorite, pieces in his bathing suit. Every time we were guaranteed a scream and a scramble as he tried to get the seaweed away from his delicate self. He was so pathetic, so weak. He rather disgusted me. Wah, he's fragile, Mom would say. I always derived some satisfaction in tormenting him. Creepy, wet, slimy seaweed was easy and plentiful at our seaside house. I'll fully admit that we were bullies back then. We didn't know what it was, that it was wrong. We just thought it was funny. And since Ben nervously laughed it off at the end, even if he cried when it was happening, we thought it was okay to continue. Kids will be kids, right? I was the oldest and therefore the biggest. Ben was always really skinny and small. I could manhandle him pretty effortlessly. I'd dunk him underwater, I'd toss him around, all that. I'd also hold him still as my other cousins draped him with seaweed. Oh, how he would scream. Eventually our parents would get involved. I'd get in trouble. Maybe even catch a beating, but nothing severe enough to dissuade me from tormenting my brother. One summer at our seaside house in California, a little north of San Francisco, tragedy would strike. Before we left, Mom took me aside and said, under absolutely no circumstances was I to tease Ben with seaweed, or do anything whatsoever that might provoke his fear of it. It turned out he'd been in therapy for the last few months. I was probably supposed to feel bad, but I didn't. I was 12. I was a dick. Still, I agreed. I wouldn't taunt the poor kid with the stuff. Little shithead. I wish he'd either man up or disappear. The water was a little too cold to go swimming, but still we enjoyed a lot of what the beach had to offer. Cool rocks, tide pools, crabs, and all that. True to my word, I didn't do anything mean to Ben. We all had a pretty good time. On the fourth day, Dad suggested a boat trip for Ben and me to see the seals and maybe even a whale or two. It was just the two of us. I guess Dad wanted to see if we could help rebuild this relationship between Ben and me. We'd been getting along pretty well since I'd agreed not to torture him anymore. I reluctantly agreed. Fine, I muttered. I'll protect poor little Ben. We set off at about 10:30 in the morning while our parents attended a lecture about a timeshare that included a free breakfast. We saw a ton of seals. They were interested in the boat and followed us along. There were quite a few colorful fish, too. We hung our head over the edge of the boat, racing the creatures almost as if we were old friends. A little over half an hour of sailing, the seals and fishes abruptly stopped, following us, and scattered. This is a spot where you see a ton of stuff. I've seen whales, seals, octopuses, and even a shark or two around here. What's that shadow? Asked Ben. I peered over the edge. I saw movement below us. What's all that stuff? Ah, I replied. That, Ben, is a kelp forest. Kelp forest? What's a kelp forest? He asked. Great big towers of plant life. Some of it grows almost 200 feet long. Plant life? Repeated Ben, his voice quiet and uncertain. That's right, I replied. This is where you'll find some of the longest and most abundant seaweed in the world. It's also the fastest growing plant on Earth and can grow 1.5 feet a day. My gaze shot to Ben, who turned pale. I have to give him credit, though. He didn't scream or anything. He just took a seat on the boat and stared at the floor. I don't feel too well, he said. Can we go home? But the temptation was too great for me. We must be careful here. Many ships have been stuck in these kelp forests, and if you're unlucky enough to fall into the water, this stuff will drag you under. But this little boat is sturdy, right? As I start to rock the dinghy side to side. Stop it, said Ben. What? Can't hear you. As I rocked harder. Stop it, he yelled. As his fear turned into anger. I'll tell Mom. Yeah, you would too, you wuss, I retorted. Immediately following my words, a whale breached, only 30 or so feet away. The seaweed forgotten, Ben hurried to the side and watched, awed as the colossal mammal launched itself into the air again and splashed down into the depth. The ripples lapped at the edge of the boat, and I heard wet sounds coming from all directions. I stared at the spot, hoping the whale would leap again. Ben was looking down at a chunk of seaweed on the surface. I knew he was wondering how far down it went. Ben and I stared at the foamy touchdown side of the whale, still hoping he would make an encore leap. As the wave generated by the massive animal hit our small skiff, I was knocked back. All I heard was the lapping sound of the waves and the strange, squishy, wet sound. I whirled around and shouted in surprise and fear, Ben? Ben? A thrashing sound came from overboard. Ben, frail Ben, had fallen overboard. In his panic state, he quickly entangled himself in the giant seaweed. Other pieces held his arms and leg, ruining him in a standing position, almost like it was exposing him as an art piece. Ben was wheezing and backing away. The kelp wormed its way around Ben, tightening its grip on him, or so it appeared. The kelp had almost taken on a life of its own. His eyes bulged in a combination of horror and from a terrible pressure being exerted on him. Help! I shouted to no one. I quickly grabbed a small hatchet and looked over the side of the boat. Help him, my conscience begged. But then, not sure why, I retracted my outstretched hand. Was it morbid fascination? Fear? Or maybe I finally wouldn't have to keep protecting Ben. I'd be free of this bothersome burden. Nature selected Ben to be prey, to die quickly, survival of the fittest and all that stuff. It also meant that I would get all the inheritance from the folks eventually. Soon everything was quiet, save for Ben's torn lungs gurgling every panicked breath. I'd stopped calling for help. I sat, huddled in the corner of the boat as Ben's form disappeared into the darkness of the unforgiving sea, as if pulled deeper by some unseen force. Before long, a Coast Guard boat came to our rescue. There was an investigation. People believed the story I told them. Ben had fallen and I wasn't able to pull him out. Despite searches, his body was never recovered. I went to therapy for a couple of years, faking missing Ben. Truth was, he was gone, and good riddance. I was the stronger and the survivor. As an adult now, and I've long since apologized for how I treated him when we were younger. But on this, the 10th anniversary of his death, by a lovely night where the moonlight shimmers over the sea, it's of little comfort. Parents are dead, car accident, or was it? And now it's only me. I've enjoyed the high lifestyle, parties, drugs, and loose women. And whenever some shred of weakness or guilt in my inaction to save Ben reared its ugly head, I would simply drown it in alcohol. Toast to you, Ben. Your sacrifice gave me a good life. Privately, I've wondered if somehow he knew what that would happen to him, if that was the reason why he was always frightened of seaweed. I guess I'll never know. Still, it makes me wonder what else he was scared of. Last thing I remember before blacking out was stumbling on the porch, drunk, at the memory of poor little Ben. A very unpleasant odor attacked my nose. Pungent, rotting, damp putrefaction. I could swear I heard the sea moaning, as if a ghost was beckoning me to come closer. Piss off, Ben, you little shit. You got what you deserve. I was too drunk to react to what looked like a pale blue arm dripping with seaweed that reached for my throat. In the stillness of the night, all I heard was some awful, inhuman gurgling sound, a desperate plea, a disappointing tone, maybe. The mist of the sea upon my brow woke me. Hours had passed. The numbing effect of alcohol still lingers slightly, but my head is clear enough to realize I cannot move. The moon is slowly setting, and with it the high tide has begun in its unstoppable march. I am buried in the sand, and with kelp up to my neck. It's like the kelp that helped Ben a decade ago. I cannot move. A certain vertigo envelops me as if it's dragging me down. I can feel despair's cold embrace. The waves will begin to lap at my face soon. I could scream, call for help, but neighbors are miles away. As my mind slowly clears, only to fall within the grip of terror at what will be my inevitable death by drowning, I end up laughing uncontrollably. Way to go. I laughed as I stared at a set of small footprints departing from my soon-to-be corpse and heading back, disappearing into the sea. They say drowning is a peaceful death. I doubt Ben will afford me this privilege, as all the deafness of the night masks my stoical laughter. Well done, Ben. Well done, little brother. And that was my story.
Spooky!
You got a dark
Well
side.
done.
You got a dark side
Did you write
there,
that?
Kevin.
I did write that.
Ooh, well done.
Yeah, so...
Man, oh man. Are you going to turn that into a graphic novel?
No, I don't think so.
That'd make a great graphic novel.
That's something right out of like Dark Tales.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whoa.
well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on the show today. I hope you guys had a fun, spooky Halloween with us.
Oh, yeah. Ending with that story was absolutely perfect. Oh, gives me shivers.
You can follow us at leftatthevalley.com. You can follow us on LATV, at LATV Podcast, on Twitter, on Facebook. You can send us an email at leftatthevalley@outlook.com. You can send us a complaint at Nancy on the 13th floor this time.
Well, not this week, because Christine and I are going to go in our two-seated broom, and we're not answering any complaints.
Tandem broom, I love that.
With our black cat on the back and our owl flying beside
You're not
us.
stealing my cat.
I'll bring the owl. Nancy can bring the cat.
If you'd be so kind, give us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever else you find the show. That really helps us, but that helps others find the show even better. Coming up, the month is over. Next week we'll be talking to author David G. McAfee.
Oh.
And for the 11th, we'll be talking to Andrew Torres.
Yes!
Of the
Opening Argument.
Opening Argument podcast. Sorry, Andrew. And on the 18th, we'll be talking to Luke Fevrin, and we also have Thomas Smith. Yes.
Oh my god!
Your favorite. Thomas Smith will be coming to talk to us as well on the show.
Also of Opening Arguments.
Also of Opening Arguments and his other inquiries only.
Serious inquiries only.
Yes. And of course, around Christmas, we'll have our Christmas special and our top 10 of the year. Now, in the next year, we'll be talking to Michael Shermer, and our old friend David Fitzgerald is coming back as well to talk about his next book. That was great. Great show, guys.
Yay.
Bye, guys.
Anything you guys want to do before we sign off?
Just recover from all the spookiness.
Okay.
Or either that or get deeper into it, whatever.
Well, instead of going out with our usual theme song, this is Bobby Boris Pickett, the classic Monster Mash.
Yes!
Until next time.
Woohoo! And have a spooky, scary, and safe Halloween night.
monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise, he did the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash. He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast, the ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my electrodes. They did the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash. They did the monster mash. The zombies were having fun. The party had just begun. The guests included Wolfman, Dracula, and his son. The scene was rocking, all were digging the sounds. Igor on chains, backed by his baying hounds. The coffin bangers were about to arrive with their vocal group, the Crypt Kicker 5. They played the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash. They played the monster mash. Out from his coffin, Drac's voice did ring. Seems he was troubled by just one thing. Opened the lid and shook his fist and said, "Whatever happened to my Transylvania twist?" It's now the monster mash. And it's a graveyard smash. It's caught on in a flash. It's now the monster mash. Now everything's cool, Drac's a part of the band, and my monster mash is the hit of the land. For you, the living, this mash was meant to. When you get to my door, tell them Boris sent you. Then you can monster mash and do my graveyard smash. You'll catch on in a flash. Then you can monster mash.